ever pondered if the reality you're living in is just an advanced computer program? It's a mind-bending concept, isn't it? This is the crux of the simulation theory, a hypothesis that suggests our reality might not be as real as we think. Instead, we might be living in a digital mirage, an incredibly advanced and sophisticated simulation. Now, before you start picturing yourself plugged into a tank like Neo in the Matrix, let's be clear. This theory isn't about being physically plugged into anything. Rather, it's about our consciousness being part of a grand digital play, unbeknownst to us. We're not suggesting that you'll suddenly develop the ability to dodge bullets, or that you'll find a man in a black suit tracking your every move. But if this theory holds true, it means that we might be living in the most immersive video game ever created. This isn't just a fantastical idea spawned from the depths of science fiction novels and movies. It's a theory that's been pondered by some of the greatest minds in our scientific community. Folks like Professor Vopson from the University of Portsmouth, who's been dabbling in the idea that we might not be living in an objective reality after all. Now that's a phrase to give any self-respecting philosopher a head rush. Instead, Professor Vopson suggests, we could be part of a super advanced virtual reality simulation. Yes, you heard it right. We could all be living in a cosmic version of The Sims. And you thought your life was complicated before. It's a wild idea with some eerie implications.
Okay, let's stop that shit right there. Let's see what this is all really about. Scientist publishes evidence that we really could all be living in the Matrix. Let's have a little bit of look further down here and see what this says. In a paper published earlier this month, physicist Melvin Vopson of the University of Portsmouth offered scientific evidence for a philosophical theory known as the simulation hypothesis. This, in a nutshell, posits that the entire universe and our objective reality are just super advanced virtual reality illusions. Okay, now far be it from me to not take on board different hypotheses and theories, but I like to see the evidence. Let's have a little bit closer look at all this stuff and dig a bit deeper. This is the definition or the description of the second law of infodynamics. And that states that the information entropy of systems containing information states must remain constant or decrease over time, reaching a certain minimum value at equilibrium. So, what I understand is that this Mr. Vopson, or Professor Vopson, has ran a study against a few different things to see if the law stands up. Now, in my mind anyway, this word information that's bandied around, certainly in the computer side of things, well, I'm a bugger for English and grammar. So before we go anywhere else, let's just quickly have a look at the etymology for information. So what we've got is information is the act of informing, communication of news. Okay, this is the base meaning of information, the communication of news, which goes into education. So obviously this over time has kind of moved a little bit, the definition to fit into computers and whatever, but it's kind of bandied around quite a lot. I just wanted to plant that in there, that this use of the term information, what it really supposedly means is the communication of news. Here's the original article that I first came across. We're all living in a Matrix-style simulated reality created by aliens. Okay, so we've now got created by aliens. Is also obviously part of this study. I think not. But here we go. A boffin reckons he's found evidence that we are all living in a Matrix-style simulated reality created by aliens. Physics professor Melvin Vopson claims his research indicates we may be characters in a virtual world created by an advanced computer. Very similar to the first article I saw you, but maybe with a little bit more detail. The Romanian academic says the universe is made up of streams of information. Right, so that's streams of news to you. Patterns and symmetrical organisms like butterflies, which closely resembles computer code. Professor Vopson quoted as saying, "My studies point to an interesting possibility that we don't live in an objective reality and that the entire universe might be just a super advanced virtual reality simulation." Okay, so you've seen the articles now that I've come across. Let's actually go and have a look at the study itself. Now, here it is. The second law of infodynamics and its implications for the simulated universe hypothesis. Okay, we've got all this introduction and blah blah, but what I really want to do is have a look at what was he testing the law against to come to the conclusion that he did. And don't forget the aliens. Okay, so here we are, second law of infodynamics and digital information. This is the first test, which is done now. Far be it for me to remark on this, but this law of infodynamics was designed surely based on digital information and storage. So this actual first section, as far as I'm concerned, of course it's going to prove itself out because that's what it was based on. Now, as you can see, the second test was against genetic information, and again this is digital data. So the second test is now, again, you could expect it. Maybe he has actually come across a few variations or some new information here, but basically, it's still digital stored information. Now, it does go, obviously this does go a lot on about entropy and the law itself. Let's just flick back to that. States that information entropy of systems. Okay, now entropy, according to the law of thermodynamics, it's a little bit different to entropy as in referring to information. So let's have a look here. Entropy. So in thermodynamics, a quantity representing the unavailability of a system's thermal energy for conversion into mechanical work, often interpreted as the degree of disorder or randomness in the system. But if we go down to the third definition here, in information theory, a logarithmic measure of the rate of transfer of information in a particular message or language. Again, put this into your mind, shelve it. So we come to the third test, and this time is basically gone for against Hund's law. Now, this is particle physics, and don't forget, particles are indeed theoretical. So theoretical particle physics attempts to develop the models, theoretical framework and mathematical tools to understand the current experiments and make predictions for future experiments. Okay. Well, I'm not convinced by this one whatsoever, but let's go and have a look at the next one. And the fourth test. In cosmology. So, how he's actually doing any kind of testing in this regard is absolutely beyond me. Universe expands, entropy increases. The rate of data transfer increases. Interesting. The entropy budget of the universe contains an unaccounted entropy term. Now, this is all bollocks. And there's one last final system that he's tried to rate his law against, which is symmetry. Some lovely pictures here and examples. So he's put symmetry is not merely a mathematical concept, it transcends disciplines connecting mathematics, chemistry, biology and physics, and appears to be a fundamental property of the universe. This is evidenced by everything around us, from the elegant symmetrical patterns of snowflakes to the fundamental symmetries governing subatomic particles, which we just saw two tests ago. Symmetry occurs at all scales, playing a pivotal role in the structure and behaviour of matter in the universe, and is showing a few examples of amazing symmetries manifesting in nature. But these symmetries are highly cherry-picked, don't you know? So here's this one. Why would nature have such symmetry? Is it a major evolutionary trait? Symmetry in a human body. You put this line, we've got a line here down the symmetry of the human body, but when you look a bit closer, the symmetry of the body doesn't quite match up, does it? It's only in these rough points, the leg. We've got 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 ears, 2 eyes, blah de blah de blah, and it's like a bit of a counterbalance. But obviously, if we didn't have that symmetry and we had one leg shorter than the other, then there'd be a lot of people hopping around. And then we've got a cat. So if we had a 3-legged cat with a mouth that's not symmetrical, its teeth are out, its jaw is down to the side, or it's not going to make a very effective predator. A starfish or fish. Well, can you imagine a non-symmetrical fish? A non-symmetrical fish will be swimming around in circles. And we've got a great example of a Christmas tree here. And of course, if everybody knows, or anybody, everybody should know that trees are mainly not like this whatsoever. In fact, here's an example of an oak tree. Not very symmetrical at all. Of course, its leaves are maybe a bit more symmetrical. But even them are all individual and very different. But yeah, okay, so yes, there is symmetry, and yes, it is important, but it's more of a, bit of a balance thing. And let's go back to this. The abundance of symmetry in the natural world begs the question, why does symmetry dominate all systems in the universe instead of asymmetry? Well, as to my examples, everything would be pretty much all over the place, fucking falling over, and whatever else. No, symmetry is, it's a bit of a necessity, to be honest. And he's exploring the some basic shapes here, and deciding that he can get so much data on a shape, and if it's simpler, then it's actually absolute, The shape with the highest symmetry has the lowest information content. This remarkable result demonstrates that the symmetries manifesting everywhere in nature and in the entire universe are a consequence of the second law of information dynamics. Well, I'm not convinced about this. But he said in his conclusion, in this study we visited the second law of infodynamics, first introduced in 2022. The second law of infodynamics states that the information entropy of systems containing information states must remain constant to decrease over time. reaching a certain minimum value of equilibrium. This is very interesting because it is in total opposition to the second law of thermodynamics, which describes the time evolution of the physical entropy that must increase up to a maximum value at equilibrium. And he's saying it's applicable to any system containing information states. What can we learn from the second law of infodynamics? It appears to validate the mass-energy information equivalence principle formulated in 2019. Basically, this is the study that's been done. However, the great professor postulated an experiment. So he's Professor Vopson. And his quote, "What I wanted to do next is put the law to the test and see if I could further support the simulation of hypotheses by moving on from the philosophical realm to mainstream science." So his study is kind of showing that it's all kind of, moving in that way. A bit of bullshit with the symmetry, I think, and using something we cannot verify or test with cosmology, and also theoretical particles. Maybe a bit of nonsense, but let's give it him. Dr. Melvin Vopson has designed an experiment to determine whether we are characters in a virtual world. If information is key component of it, it would make sense that a vast computer somewhere is in control. Assuming the universe is indeed a simulation, then it must contain a lot of information bits hidden everywhere around us. I've devised an experiment that proposes a way of extracting this information to prove it's there. Okay, are you ready for this? Dr. Vopson's experiment is based on his previous research findings that information is physical and has mass, and that elementary particles have a DNA of information about themselves. His experiment proposes how to detect and measure the information in an elementary particle by using particle-antiparticle collision. He said, quote, "We can measure the information content of a particle by erasing it. If we delete the information from the particles, we can then look at what's left." Should we just go through that again? We can measure the information content of a particle by erasing it. If we delete the information from the particles, we can then look at what's left. Seriously? This experiment is highly achievable with our existing tools. I would love to know what they are. These ones that can smash a particle and antiparticle together, and then see what information is left. He's hoping the crowdfunding site will help us achieve us. Well, unfortunately, it isn't just me who disagreed with this little explanation of all this work and all the articles and everything else, because this is all it comes down to, is him after £180,000 to perform this amazing experiment. And just to confirm here, this is antiparticles, and what they are. Obviously, basically, you have matter and antimatter. Particles have their own antiparticles. But look at this. When a particle meets its antiparticle, the result is annihilation. All the mass of the particle and the antiparticle gets converted back to energy in the form of 2 gamma ray photons. So there's not going to be anything left to measure, is there? Not a damn thing. And what information exactly are you going to see in the first place? Or even if you had something left, what exactly are you going to be looking at, looking through? What optics have we got that can look at these, smashed up particles at all? Highly doubtful. Highly doubtful indeed. What an absolute load of bollocks. And here we go. Just to tie up this thing, and where does all this idea of simulation theory come from? Well, this is about as far back as I could track it, and this is a paper by a Nick Bostrom. Are you living in a computer simulation? All very interesting. I'll leave the link in the box below if you want to read it, but let's just go to the conclusions here. So the very last line just says it all. Unless we are now living in a simulation, our descendants will almost certainly never run an ancestor simulation. And that's just about it from me. Thanks very much.
But don't worry, it's still just a theory. So the next time you experience deja vu, it might not be a glitch in your brain, but a glitch in the matrix.
Yeah, the aliens are coming. For us, you and I, that's why we must merge as one, together, to defeat them and their lasers.